So I was struck by that central idea, how to think. It comes up time and again, that if the Christian community has a place at the table of intellectual affairs and discussion, we ought to be bringing a good argument to the table. And I think then what we need to do is begin with at least an idea of how to look at various views and ideas and concepts and thinking that's out there. Our next speaker has a little bit of a chore, if you like, in this regard, but he's well prepared for the mission. He will examine the many views of truth, giving an overview for the other speakers today. In fact, it'll kind of lay out at least some of what we'll be discussing. Dr. Duane Kellogg is the director and senior therapist for the Renew Counseling Center, which is, by the way, right next door here to Trinity. He attended the Barrington College and received a B.A. in Biblical Studies and Philosophy. He went to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, completing a Master's in Divinity, Fuller Theological Seminary, finishing with an M.A. in Marriage and Family Ministries. And then lastly, he went to the Andover Newton Theological School, completing a degree, the degree of the doctorate in ministry in psychology. His presentation today is entitled, "Where Do You Take a Stand?" Would you join me in welcoming Dr. Duane Kellogg?
While I was listening to our last speaker, I was thinking about my own experience at the University of Connecticut. In 1968, I went to UConn as a freshman, and one of my first classes was a class in philosophy. And I still remember this atheistic professor sitting on his desk with his legs crossed in front of him, spouting off all kinds of things. And I was just kind of overwhelmed by that and had really no idea how to respond to him. But it certainly got my mind thinking and actually continued a course that I had already started on in terms of trying to figure out an intellectual defense for Christianity that had started back when I was in fourth grade, believe it or not. I won't go into that, but anyhow, I ended up transferring to a Christian school after that first year, not so much because of that class in philosophy, but because there really wasn't anything at UConn that I found that would support me emotionally, relationally. I mean, I was just like all by myself. I felt very isolated. It was the worst year of my life. And transferring to Barrington College in Rhode Island, a Christian school, which is now part of Gordon College, was probably one of the best decisions I had made, because there I was able to continue my journey into understanding the Christian faith, but having it presented to me by men of faith who really understood the scriptures and the philosophical backgrounds and so on. Anyhow, it would have been great to have a group like Ratio Christi there when I had been there, although I'm not sure I would have found it. There was an intervarsity group on campus at UConn when I went there, but I thought it had something to do with sports, and I wasn't into sports, so I never even checked it out. So this is an interesting discussion, isn't it? Like, what is truth, and is there truth? And a lot of people don't really think that way. It's something that really appeals to me, though. I've always been sort of that kind of person that thinks about those kinds of issues. But I was glad to have this opportunity to come today and talk about this. Some of you may be wondering, what's a mental health professional doing talking about truth? When they were showing about the professors and how many believe in the Bible and how many are atheists and so on, I read a discussion about, or actually an article, giving the statistics for people who are in the social work, clinical social work departments at the colleges and universities, and it's worse than what the general statistics show. It's even higher for people in the social sciences. There tend to be even more people who are antagonistic toward the Christian faith in those groups, and so they're pumping out people into my field who really have an antagonistic view toward the evangelical faith, and so I'm constantly in sort of battle, if you will, with people like that. But anyhow, our culture, I think, as you know, has become very multicultural, right? The United States has always been that way, but it's even more so now, and we're getting a wider variety of people, certainly an influx of Islamic citizens and so on. And one of the difficulties with that, I mean, there's a lot of good to that, in that it gives us a lot more variety and color and spice to life. But on the other side, there's a danger of it erupting into conflict, right? Because when you have differences, there's a certain perceived threat. And so you tend to get angry at people that are different than you because you see them as a threat. And so the fear that exists in our culture today is that we might all break apart into all these little groups of people that become antagonistic toward one another and start fighting each other and so on. I mean, we see that kind of sectarian violence going on around the world, right? I mean, we've seen it in Ireland, we've seen it in the Middle East, and we're seeing it today all over the place. So, what people have tended to do, the thinking people in our culture, the people in the universities and so on, what they're trying to do, I mean, their motivation, I think, is good. What they're trying to do is increase the level of tolerance, okay? That we would just kind of coexist and get along with each other, and your truth is true for you, and my truth is true for me, and let's all just get along. I mean, that's really what this is all about. The problem with that, of course, is that what they're also saying then is that there really is no objective truth, at least when it comes to certain things like religion. But it's not just religion, it's also things like history. So history is like whoever wins the battles decides to write the history, right? And so, we can't trust history anymore. There's even some of that going in science, where the scientists' own beliefs are beginning to be questioned in terms of how they approach what they're doing in their scientific studies and their experiments and so on. So scientific truth is beginning to be questioned as well. So historical truth, scientific truth. I think mathematics is pretty safe right now. I haven't heard a whole lot about that. But this is beginning to spill over in a lot of different areas, and certainly it's spilled over into my area, which is psychology and counseling, where the social sciences are sometimes called the soft sciences, and they are probably most vulnerable to this kind of thing. But what I want to talk about today to get started with is, let's see, I've got to figure this thing out here. A big word that some of you probably have heard, but it's a great one to throw at a party if you want to appear to be smart. But epistemology, it's a big word, but it's an easy one to break down. It's based on 3 Greek words, epi, which is upon, histani, to stand, and logi, which is the study of. So that's all it is. Epistemology is the study of what you stand on, okay? Where do you start your thinking? How do you figure out what is true? How do you figure out what is real? I would contend that wherever you start, and I'm going to give you the 4 basic places that you can start, but wherever you start, they're all based ultimately on faith. Okay? That you cannot prove one with another. You can support one with another, but you can't prove one with another, okay? And that's an important thing to understand. So we're going to be looking at epistemology, where you start, how you begin the whole process of determining what is real and what is true. Okay, so the first one is called mysticism, and it can be linked to what we sometimes refer to today as intuition. How do I know what is true? Well, it just kind of, well, it's like that guy that, the history, somebody we just heard of. Anyhow, one of the guys, I can't remember if it was John, but I think it might have been John, who was talking about the fact that the guy believed that people go to heaven based upon the fact that they're good, right? And he was asked, well, how do you, what do you, oh yeah, it was John's friend there or something at a party, family party. How do you get to that position? How do you know that people that are good go to heaven? And the guy says, well, I just believe it, all right? That's this position here, okay? It's mysticism, it's intuition. It just feels right to me, okay? So that's what a lot of the early pagan religions are based on. It's just sort of an early, this thought that this must be what it is. We see a New Age spiritual stuff is now based pretty much on this, okay? It's based on it just kind of feels good, it looks good, I kind of like the idea, I'm going to believe it, okay? That's one way to go. The second one is known as rationalism or logic. This is one that we traditionally associate with Greek thinking. This is, the whole idea that you can prove the existence of God, for example, by coming up with these arguments, logical arguments for the existence of God. And there was a lot of time and effort that was spent doing that for years, centuries, and in fact, that was one of the things that was included in my first philosophy course at UConn, believe it or not, and the idea was to show how you really can't do that. But anyhow, a lot of effort has gone into that. How do you know that something is true? Well, is it logical? Does it make sense? Does it fit with my reasonable expectations of how things should be? Okay, that's the second one. The third one is the empirical approach, also called the scientific approach. This is the idea that if you can see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, weigh it, measure it, that's what's true. And, is there a podium right here that I'm touching with my hand? Is it made out of wood? Is it 4.5 feet tall? Whatever. Okay, I can do all those measurements and determine that this indeed is a podium and so on, okay? So science is the way to go. That's how you determine what is true. The fourth one is one that all of us use in some form or another. In fact, we probably all use all of these in certain instances. But the authoritative or the revelational one, okay? This is the idea that we believe what's true based upon another authority. So, for example, how many of you believe that a man named Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492? Well, how do you know that that's true? How do you know that's true? It's in the history book. Okay, so now now you are depending on that, the trustworthiness of the history book and the historians to believe that that's true. All right, now, what was the year that man first landed on the moon? 1969? Okay, now how do you know that that happened? Okay, do you believe everything you see on TV? All right, so how do you know that it happened? You could have talked to the astronaut, but did you? Okay, so you might have had a second-hand account. You saw it on TV, and it was done like a real news thing, and you saw the pictures. I can remember seeing that happen. Do I believe? There are actually people who do not believe that that happened. Okay? And because they discount what they saw on TV, and they discount the authorities of our culture who said that that happened, and they say that was made up. But there's a lot of stuff that we believe based upon authority, and this is just to give you an example. Now, the primary one for Christians is we believe in God revealing himself to us, and that's recorded. His self-revelation is recorded in a book that we call the Bible, right? And so a lot of what we believe is based upon what's revealed to us by God in the Bible. The thing that all four of these methods of determining truth have in common is that they all believe that there is such a thing as truth. Okay? However, the difference is the first three believe that man determines truth, okay? That it's discovered by us. We discover truth. The last one, Revelation, believes that truth reveals itself to us. And that's an important point, because what we sometimes call humanism is based upon those first three. Okay, we believe that humans are the ones who determine what truth ultimately is by discovering it, and that leads to what's sometimes called humanism. And then the last one is one that's separated from the others and is based upon the belief that we are not able to determine what's ultimately true. We can't discover it anyhow. It has to, I guess you could say, discover us. So that is an important differentiation between them. Now, if you combine two of them, which is, maybe I'll hang on to that one. We'll get to that in a minute. I think I'll skip to that one. If you combine empiricism and rationalism, what you get is modernism. Okay, that is what our modern world is based on. Okay, it's like the whole idea of science and technology and medical advancement and so on. What we consider to be all these wonderful advances are based upon the combination of science and reason. Okay, what we sometimes call postmodernism is the rejection of those. In fact, it's the rejection of basically all of them, with the idea that you can't really determine truth. There is no truth, okay? There is no objective truth. There's only subjective truth. So what is subjective truth? Subjective truth is vanilla ice cream is the best tasting ice cream in the world, okay? That would be a subjective truth. I would say that that's true. Now you, on the other hand, may say, well, no. Chocolate, there you go. Chocolate is the best taste, flavor ice cream, okay? Now, you see, in a situation like that, we could easily say, well, what's true for me is true for me, and what's true for you is true for you, and that's just a subjective truth, okay? Objective truth is something like this. The world is a globe. It's not flat. It's a sphere. Now, you may believe that the world is flat, but you would be wrong. Okay, that would be objective truth. We could actually, there are people that could probably show you and demonstrate that to you in ways that you would then come to see, oh, okay, the world isn't flat. It is a sphere. So now, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed up here a little bit. And I'm not going to cover some of the things I was going to do, but there's a couple of things that I just want to show you how this works, okay? Do you believe in angels? Why do you believe in angels? See, if you were to ask somebody, do you believe in angels? Someone might say, yeah, I believe in angels. Why? And would say, why do you believe in angels? And they'd say, well, I love the idea. It's just kind of cool, to believe that there are these beings that, kind of do these things, okay? And they come alongside you and they help you, and it's just a really neat idea, That would be which of those four? Which one of those four epistemological approaches would that kind of, what? The first one, right? The mystical, intuitive one. There's a lot of people like that they believe in angels because they like the idea. Now, what would if you were to ask a logical, reasonable person, that's their primary approach, okay? And we're talking about, I'm not saying that people have just one approach, I'm saying that they have a primary approach that they use to determine whether or not the other things that they are taking in are true, okay? So a rational, logical person looking at angels, what would they say? Huh? They would say it's possible, yeah. I mean, there's no way you can reasonably say that there aren't angels. So there could be, it's just like you'd be an agnostic if you would, in terms of angels, if you were approaching it from that perspective, right? What about an empiricist, a scientist? What would they, who use science as their way of determining truth? And you're right, no way. Unless I can see an angel and dissect an angel and has anybody here talked to an angel that you know of, other than your spouse maybe? No. No, I mean, have you ever really had that kind of a conversation? I haven't, okay? I haven't, not that I know of. I haven't talked to an angel. One hasn't talked to me. So I've never seen one. I've never heard one. Never measured one, never weighed one, okay? So from an empirical perspective, no. What about from a revelational one? Yeah, right? Okay, I believe in angels. Why? Because the Bible says there are angels. Okay, the Bible says there are angels. So I believe it. I've never seen one, but I believe it because that's my primary epistemological approach to life. And so when it comes to things in psychology, for example, I accept a lot of stuff that comes out of psychology. There's a lot of good psychological studies that go on that help us understand human behavior. Okay, but if there's anything that's coming out of there that contradicts Scripture or is revelational, what do you think I do? I reject it, okay, because it doesn't fit with my primary method of determining what's real and true. So that's sort of the overview for today in terms of what we're going to be talking about, and everyone's going to have sort of a different take on some of this, but I think you'll find it helpful as they go along and explain in more detail how all of these things kind of fit together. So I don't know if I should take questions or if we're running out of time.
We'll take a few questions, yes.
What was that?
Can't use one approach.
Oh, okay, yeah, we can't use one to prove another. Yeah, because if again, this is where you start. This is where each one of these places is where you start. We can't use reason to prove revelation. We can use reason to support revelation, but you're never going to prove it. Okay? Because they're all starting at different places. Think about that one. So I love apologetics. I'm all for it. But I don't believe you'll ever prove Christianity using reason or logic or science.
Do you think it would be fair to say you could use one approach to disprove another?
No.
For example, empiricism, your starting point is that you only know what you can test empirically. Well, that very proposition itself cannot be tested empirically, therefore it's inherent.
Yeah, empiricism begins with faith. How do I know that I'm here? How do I know I'm not dreaming this? Yeah. We're saying, does truth exist? Well, we can go even more basic than that. Do I exist? Okay? And then you get into, and of course Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, right? That's what he used to try to determine that he existed. But, okay, so what he's doing is using a rational approach to determine his existence, yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And just to clarify, apologetics is not about proving.
Okay,
It's about
yeah.
evidence.
It's about what?
Evidence.
Evidence, okay.
Providing reason.
Right.
But I guess the question that I would have for you is, what do you do then with first principles? Things like self-evident truths, the law of non-contradiction. Where would they fit into that? And because to me, it seems that because they are self-evident, they can't possibly not be true.
If I'm coming from an intuitive perspective, a mystical perspective, I would just totally discount what you just said.
But you can't deny the law of non-contradiction without affirming it.
But I wouldn't care. Because I'm coming from an intuitive approach. What you're saying doesn't matter to me.
But then what you're saying is it doesn't not matter, right?
Right.
So you're saying that it's the opposite of mattering. So it's got to be true.
But you see, again, we're looking at someone who's coming at the world with a totally different perspective. And they're not going to buy into your laws of logic.
Okay, and I appreciate that their perspective, but that in no way undermines the fact of the matter.
From your perspective, it doesn't. But from an intuitive, mystical one, it doesn't matter.
So in a way, maybe what if I could just add a little something, maybe what Duane is saying. So from someone, perhaps, who is in a position of where, does truth exist? There's almost a complete dispensation. They've almost gotten rid of the whole concept of logic, any semblance of a framework. And of course, it could be very frustrating because how do you even get to a first?
How do you talk to someone
How do you
like
get
that?
to a first principle
Like,
in some ways? Perhaps that's what he's saying.
Yeah, it's like postmodernism. The idea that a postmodernist says that truth, objective truth, does not exist. Just that statement alone is contradictory, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because if you say no objective truth exists, I'm just making an objective truth statement, right? But
Right. And to just sort of, again, reaffirm that, we do have to kind of move along a little bit. When you say, no, truth does not exist, have you not just given a truth about something?
right.
It doesn't exist. So there is this whole problem with absurdity,
Yeah.
right, that you run into.
Right. Any other questions? Quick questions, because I guess we're really
Well,
running
go
out of
ahead.
time here. Yeah.
Wouldn't you just say that all four approaches, in some respect or another, share a common denominator in that you can either support them or use them as a base by way of inference to the best explanation?
You can see, Christianity uses all of these approaches, right? I mean, yeah. Now, empiricism, and the empirical approach uses authority, right? I mean, they base a lot of what they do based on prior experiments, and so they're saying, we're affirming this authority here who said this, right? The intuitive approach is really the most nebulous one in terms of what they.
It's the most apparent, only because, like, the existence of angels, for example.
Yeah.
We don't, as Christians, we don't believe in angels because we've seen them, we can't quantify them, they're incalculable, so on and so forth. We believe them by virtue of some other beliefs, some major overriding beliefs, which we're told biblically are intuitive, and we believe that by way of intuition, by virtue of these other beliefs that we have, that we can demonstrate by way of empiricism, and really all four of them, and, Revelation as well.
Right. I'm not sure if I'm totally following you, but I think.
So the existence of angels is an entailment of our other beliefs that we have, that we can demonstrate, give evidence for. And I don't mean prove, I mean demonstrate.
Okay.
Give evidence for.
Yeah.
By way of the other means that you're discussing. So again, because we have this evidence of Christianity being so abundant, so prevalent.
Okay.
I'm saying these other beliefs are entailments, and, a lot of them, I think, our strongest ones are, Scripture, Romans 1, Paul says we believe in God. People know God exists. We know, people are denying it.
That I believe that we are religious creatures, if you will. Eternity has been set into our hearts, right? And so we do have that inherent thing going, if you will, which you could refer to as intuition, but we probably
So truth does exist. We're running late. And let's have a round of applause for Dr. Kellogg.